Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we've got a couple of Amicus films from the 1970s, 1974 and 1977. They're a movie and a sequel, and so they're going to be the double feature this time around. Both are based on novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and both of them star the inestimable Doug McClure. They are, of course, The Land That Time Forgot from 1974 and its sequel, The People That Time Forgot from 1977. Both were directed by Kevin Connor, who did a lot of work with Amicus, including the third of the Edgar Rice Burroughs adaptations they did, At the Earth's Core, the one with Peter Cushing in it, and also with Doug McClure. And both of them were right at the end of Amicus's tenure as a movie company. In fact, the second one was made, and before it was released, Amicus folded and American International Pictures released the movie. But let's start with the first one, which is kind of cool and for me is the better of the two. The Land That Time Forgot is set in 1916 and a merchant ship has been torpedoed by a German U-boat, U-33.
Bingo! How fun!
The captain, that's a guy called Von Schoenort, played by John McEnery, but his voice is dubbed by Anton Diffring. And to be honest with you, Anton Diffring does a pretty good job of it. There are a few survivors of the merchant ship, one of whom is Bowen Tyler, played by Doug McClure, whose father made submarines before anybody else in the world. There's also a woman called Lisa, played by Susan Penhaligon, who's a biologist, a bunch of other crew. There's a German guy called Dietz, played by Anthony Ainley, who for a short time played the Master on Doctor Who. But the most impressive thing about this is the script is by James Cawthorne and Michael Moorcock, the science fiction writer. It's one of the few movie credits Moorcock has, the other one being for his movie The Final Program, which was adapted by Robert Fust about the same time as this one came out. So the U-boat sinks the merchant ship. The survivors are in a lifeboat. They hear the U-boat and decide to take it over, which they do. But Dietz, being the sneaky bugger that he is, messes with the compass and they travel south instead of travelling west. And so they end up at a previously unknown subcontinent called Caprona, which is basically an enormous volcanic crater surrounded by a wall of ice and mountains, which has prehistoric life on it. And life on Caprona is very different because it evolves the further you go along the continent. So things that are very primitive at the start and then eventually evolve further and further until you reach the other end of the island where there are human-like creatures. Before that, there are pre-human creatures of various kinds that have got various names. There are dinosaurs, there are enormous river dragons, there are all sorts of nasty things. And the submarine finds Caprona, travels through an underground river, and ends up in Caprona. The Germans and the non-German people who took over the ship decide to cooperate until they find a way off the island, and then they're going to travel to a neutral port should they all survive. So it's a stock standard Lost World kind of movie, and that's fine. It works well as that. The dinosaurs themselves are sketchy. Basically, they're either flying models of pterodactyls or they're giant puppets of various kinds. There's no really great monsters in this one, but the world building kind of works. Apparently a lot of it was shot in a disused clay pit in Berkshire, and it kind of worked in spite of that. And the dinosaur puppets kind of work. They're serviceable, they're fun. You know that they're puppets, but if you're inclined to, you go along with that and just accept that. The model work is particularly good, even though they've got the difficulty of working with water with models, where the water never quite looks right and doesn't scale well to look realistic. It still works pretty good for the 1970s. And the map paintings in this one are really nice. They're beautifully done. You know they're map paintings, but when map paintings get of a certain quality, you kind of roll with that and you accept it, and you kind of go, yeah, that's fine. That's exactly what I want. That's the kind of thing I expect from a movie of this vintage at this budget. The crew of the submarine and the survivors of the merchant ship find crude oil in ponds and lakes on the island and decide to purify that a bit because they need enough fuel to get the submarine out of Caprona. Meanwhile, they've got to survive all the perils of the place, quicksand and dinosaurs and feral natives. They make friends with one of the natives, a Neanderthal-type guy called Arn, who explains the weird evolutionary path that life takes on Caprona. And the makeup for the pre-humans, or other hominids, let's say, because we've got a more nuanced view of other human species than we had in 1974, is pretty good. Really up close, you can tell it's makeup, but in the medium shot, it's quite believable. They went out of their way to make it look plausible, and I appreciate the effort on that one. A lot of the front of the film is getting set up to reach the island, so there's the explosion, there's the survivors in the lifeboat, there's the people taking over the U-boat, there's a lot of travel in the U-boat. So the first half of the movie is getting to the island, and when they get there, you're ready for it. You've got the characters established, you've got Bo and Tyler, you've got Lisa, you've got the Germans, and so it does that thing that you really need in any kind of movie like this, where the characters are established enough to make the peril matter, and it does that really well. Now, the production values for an Amicus film are pretty high in this. The pyrotechnics in particular are really good. There are some really good splody bits, and particularly when they're trying to escape the island and Bowen, Tyler and Lisa are running after the submarine, which is escaping off the island. Spoiler, they don't get off the island, and that then leads to the sequel. The fires and the explosions behind the actors, being Susan Penhaligon and Doug McClure, are really good. They're kind of silhouetted against all of this background stuff because it takes place at night. And that works for a low-budget film, a fairly low-budget film. Using those explosions and those fires to good effect really enhances the peril that we find the characters in. Of course, the lava effects are never very good in these films, but that doesn't really matter. And the most valuable player here is Doug McClure. Kevin Connor, the director, said that Doug McClure was fantastic to work with. He knew how to do physical action on screen. He'd done it on television. He'd done it in movies previously. He knew where the camera was. He knew how to sell a punch and sell the action and do the fight scenes really well, which he does. There are some solid action fight scenes in this, and Doug McClure really sells them. He was never a complicated actor, but he was always plausible and believable and personable. And he always had that nice working class feel about him, where he wasn't a posh guy trying to act tough. And The Land of Time Forgot works because, very simply, Amicus tried to really sell a Lost Continent movie in a big way. You could compare and contrast this with Hammer's movie, The Lost Continent, which was shot entirely on sound stages. Amicus's The Land That Time Forgot works better in most ways than Hammer's effort. It really gives us a believable and at the same time very silly world. When seen in close-up, the dinosaur puppets look good. There's a nice texture to them. They don't look crudely made. Special effects technicians did a marvellous job on that. So The Land That Time Forgot is a lot of fun to watch in the same way that At the Earth's Core is. Though the production values of At the Earth's Core are a little poorer, I think that one's fun as well, and I may do it for a future video. That then takes us to 1977, and the people that Time Forgot. Expedition is sent to Caprona to find and potentially rescue Lisa and Bo and Tyler, played by Doug McClure. A ship is sent out, and with the ship is an amphibious plane, which is very groovy. It's about a 6-seater. It's got a little machine gun nest up the front. It's a biplane, and it looks good. It never looks real, but it looks good. And the ensemble works really well. I'll kind of go from the bottom up. You got Shane Rimmer playing the mechanic in this. Shane Rimmer we know from Thunderbirds and any number of other English films. American actor who made his career in England. Thorley Walters plays a scientist who comes along, and Thorley Walters is always fun in this. And the funny thing is that normally in movies, Thorley Walters is the comic relief, but not necessarily in this one, because Shane Rimmer's mechanic character who stays with the plane while everybody else goes off looking for Bo and Tyler is the comic relief in this, and that kind of works. Switching that thing around is interesting. We've also got Sarah Douglas, who was one of Zod's hench people in Superman 2, playing a photographer, a journalist who is sent by her father, who owns a newspaper and finances the expedition. She's set out with a camera, and she holds her own as well. She can hold her own in a fight. She shoots people when she needs to. She's one of those tough chick action stars that we started to get in the 1970s. And the main hero, and I use that term very loosely, is a guy called Ben McBride, played by John Wayne's son, Patrick Wayne. Now, here's the problem. Patrick Wayne kind of looks like Henry Cavill, but he doesn't have a millionth of the charisma of Henry Cavill. He doesn't move well in the action scenes, and he plays the character as a grumpy asshole, and that doesn't work for me. If you're going to be the action star centerpiece of one of these movies, you've got to play it slightly tongue-in-cheek, and you've got to play it like you're enjoying yourself to a certain extent. And he plays it like his wife just left him. And that's a real problem, particularly in the last quarter of the movie, where they find Bo and Tyler and Doug McClure gets some action scenes in the City of Skulls, which is an interesting little set piece, which has one of the great bad matte paintings of all time. The ensemble meets a group called the Naga, who are basically Japanese samurai on horseback, who are henchmen to a king, played by the wonderful Milton Reed. And the executioner is none other than David Prowse. You've got Darth Vader in a mask with a giant chopper playing the executioner. Doesn't get any dialogue, but he's there just for the muscle. And we get some really great fight sequences when Doug McClure shows up and shows how it's done. In the meantime, Patrick Wayne just kind of fumbles and stumbles his way around the action scenes and really doesn't know enough about good fight choreography to sell the fights. Foley Walters with a rapier does better than Patrick Wayne in this one. He later went on to play Sinbad in one of the worst Sinbad movies. And again, he's got zero rears. Really doesn't sell it at all. He's the John Agar of the 1970s. Now, the movie looks good. There's a lot of location shooting in the volcanic plains and forests of the Canary Islands. Getting the production out of the home counties of England works really well and sells the story of it being a lost continent. There are some interesting monsters. We get the usual puppets. We get a couple of pterodactyls attack the plane, and you can see the wires holding them up, which is a thumbs up from me. I like that. I'm there for Thorley Walters with a Lewis gun shooting at pterodactyls from an aeroplane. I don't care whether it looks good. And the best bit of this film, apart from when Doug McClure turns up, and apart from Dana Gillespie playing a native girl who Bo and Tyler taught English, and who wears a costume which is probably more suited to an OnlyFans than an action film. Apart from all of that, the pyrotechnics at the end, when the volcano explodes, are really good. There are lots of explosions as the actors are running down volcanic scoria slopes. And there's lots of air cannon action. There's lots of propane gas flames. There's a lot of explosions just over ridge lines, which sell this movie really well. I was surprised at how much explosion there is at the end of The People That Time Forgot. And emits a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. But still, without that primary focus of having an engaging lead actor and only bringing in a decent lead actor 3/4 of the way through the film, kind of makes it lag. And that's a bit of a pity. With somebody with a bit more charisma working at the front end, it would have worked well. And unlike the rest of the ensemble, Patrick Wayne's character, Ben McBride, doesn't seem to be playing with the other actors. He seems to be playing at the other actors, if you know what I mean and you know what the difference is. And that takes the energy out of any scene he's in. So I'm a little disappointed in that. Haven't seen this one for a very long time, but there are a lot of impressive things. The explosions, the monsters, even though they're puppets, the cave snakes that pop out of the sides of cave walls, the big armoured brute that they fight inside a cave until a stalactite pierces it. It's very much 1970s popcorn fodder. It's kid-friendly, and it's a lot of fun. I really like the way it does what it does. Some of the choices made really knocked it in the arse. The People That Time Forgot is a good watch. It's fun to watch. It's also fun to dissect the bits that don't work in them. I think this is one of those movies where you learn what works in an action film and you learn what doesn't. It's an educational pair of movies in that sense. But I've always liked Doug McClure. Yes, he was mocked in Troy McClure in The Simpsons, all of that kind of stuff. But if you look through his movie and TV work, he was always a good, solid, respectable and respected jobbing actor. And all credit to him for that. I really have great fond memories of him in a number of TV series, including Search, the one he did with Hugh O'Brien and Anthony Franciosa, which was a bit of a wheel story of three agents using some very high-tech surveillance equipment to do adventure stuff. He also did Barbary Coast with Shatner, a short-lived series which was a lot of fun. And to be honest, Doug McClure was much better at it than Shatner was. Those two movies are my double feature for this week. Enjoy them both. They were amicus, so I've got a certain love for them anyway. And I think they were amicus trying something different, but at least in a financial sense, not succeeding in it, which is a great pity. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. You can donate to the channel if you just look out the window in YouTube. There's a little $sign in a heart. You can become a channel member or donate through that. Or you can become a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, I should have a nice haul from Umbrella, which has got some really groovy horror movies in it. Then, of course, we get back to Science Fiction Saturday, and the cycle starts again. Until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some Doug McClure movies, and I'll catch you next time.